Welcome to the Fearfully and Wonderfully Me podcast, a podcast designed to help you increase your influence, develop your leadership, and maximize your results.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's podcast episode. Today, we are talking about the chapter in my book, Leadership Gems for Women, Be Resilient. And this really builds on what I talked about last week in the podcast episode I did last week on choosing to be positive. And I think resilience just sort of builds on that, right? We absolutely, can choose to be positive and proactive. And I think in order to be resilient, we have to be positive and proactive. So what is resilience? Resilience is thriving, is going on to thrive, is springing back after adversity, after things knock us down. Nelson Mandela said, the greatest glory in living is not in never falling, but in rising every time we fall. Because we are going to fall in life. We are going to get knocked down. Resilience is rising strong in spite of it. Resilience is the difference when we go through something hard. Resilience is the difference between I didn't die and I learned to live again. And that's a huge difference, right? A lot of times we go through problems and we don't die, right? You go through divorce, or you lose your job, or you get sick, or you have health challenges, or maybe you lost a loved one, but you didn't die. But there's a difference in just I didn't die versus I learned to live again. And that's the resilience piece, right? Going on to thrive, not just survive. And I know it's a little bit of a cliche to say, you want to thrive and not just survive, but it's so true because, you already know this. We go through adversity in life, right? Just because you are a human having a human experience, you are going to have problems, challenges, adversity in life. I talk about that a lot because life happens and it's not easy. It's not always going to be smooth. There are going to be times when life is great. Everything is going your way. There are going to be a lot of times when it's not going your way. And, you can drag it along with you for the rest of your life, or you can let it go and be resilient. It's not easy. I recognize that. And I know that it can be more challenging depending on the season that you're in or what you're going through. But it's choosing to be positive and proactive and applying those principles to your life and saying, I'm not going to merely survive through this. I'm going to thrive again in spite of it or because of it. I'm using this as a stepping stone and I'm going to stand on top of it and be stronger and bigger and better because of it. The problems and the challenges that we encounter in life can't grow, right? We can. And I think that's the key in being resilient, is growing and developing ourselves so that those problems don't change in size, but we do, and our ability to overcome them. Now, you can probably relate to this. You've maybe unconsciously done this in your life. Think back to some of the things that you thought were problems as a teenager. I'm serious. And particularly if you're a parent now and you have teenagers and you think, some of the things that they think are problems are very, very minor in the grand scheme of life, but not to them. To them, not getting invited to the right party is just, socially devastating. And you, 20 years later, as the parent, are thinking, if that person didn't invite you to their party, then I would find a new friend because they obviously aren't your friend, right? You're looking at that with a different mindset and a different perspective because you've grown and matured since you were that 15-year-old person who didn't get invited to the party, right? It's just natural that if we've grown, our problems from 20 years ago look smaller or less significant than they did back when we were growing through them. And so if you can now look at yourself and your current situation and look forward and say, if I can grow and develop myself and continue to grow and develop myself, the problems I'm going to encounter tomorrow, next week, next year are not going to seem as big. Even if they're the same size, I'm going to be at a different place, a different growth journey. It's sort of like looking at this anthill. Maybe it's a giant anthill. But if you get down on the ground, I know you're not going to do this really, but if you were to get down on the ground and lay down beside the anthill would look huge as it lays, as you're laying in front of it and it's right in front of your face. Don't do that because the ants would come eat you. But my point here is if you were laying right beside it, that anthill would look monstrous. It would look huge. It would be right in your face. But if you stand up and you're standing tall to your full height, you're looking down at the anthill, it doesn't look as big. The anthill hasn't changed. And really, in this example, all you've done is change perspectives. But it's an example of seeing things from a different level. They look bigger or smaller, right? So resilience is being able to thrive and spring back, but we've got to grow ourselves and grow our ability to do that because it doesn't really happen automatically. We'll survive. Most things that we go through, even horrible, painful things, most of the time we will survive, literally, but we won't automatically go on to thrive. And that's the difference. I call it the resilience factor. And maybe some people have a little more of it naturally. I don't know. But I do know that when we've overcome something in the past, we strengthen that resilience factor and we are more resilient going forward. So it's kind of like a muscle that once we develop it and train it, it's much easier to work it out again in the future because we've already built it. Now we just have to use it, right? So think about that and think about the times in your life when you've already encountered obstacles and you've gotten more resilient, you bounced back from those obstacles. And so the next time you encounter an obstacle, a challenge, and you go through something, think back and say, you know what? I've already overcome some things. I'm a pretty amazing person in terms of resilience because I've already look at the things I've overcome so far. Look at what I've done. Look at what I've been able to overcome so far. This is going to be something where I just use those muscles I've already developed and overcome this too. I don't know how yet, but I'm going to take it one step at a time. Rick Warren, he was the author of Purpose Driven Life, which if you haven't read it, it's a great book. But he shares a quote about resilience. He says, "We are products of the past, but we don't have to be prisoners of it." And to me, that's a really powerful quote because a lot of times when we're challenged to be resilient, it's due to something in our past we're dragging around behind us, maybe for years. And I think resilience is saying, I'm a product of that, what happened, but I'm not a prisoner of it. I'm not a prisoner to it. I've said it before, but the things that happen to us in life are not as important as who we become because of it. What happens to us in life influences us. There's no doubt it shapes us, but it doesn't determine us, right? It doesn't determine us. Your history is not your destiny. You can choose to be resilient in saying this happened and it influenced me, but I get to decide how. Am I going to be bitter about it? I'm going to choose to be better because of it. And it's not an easy choice. I recognize that. I say that over and over again, but I know a lot of times as we talk about these principles, they sound good and they do hard, right? They sound easy and they do hard, but they are powerful when we apply them, but you have to apply them, right? Just knowing about resilience doesn't help you move forward in life. And the thing is that we're either moving forward or backward. We cannot choose to just stay still. Refusing to choose is a choice. It's just choosing to be swept backward. So, we've got that choice to move forward. It doesn't mean that we will always get it right in how we move forward. But, we talked a lot about responsibility a couple of podcast episodes ago. And I saw a picture quote the other day that said, what happened is not your responsibility. I think it said what your trauma is not your responsibility, but healing from it is. And I thought, wow, that was pretty bold way to put that. Things that happen are not necessarily our fault, but our healing, our resilience is our responsibility, right? You may or may not have caused what happened indirectly or directly, but you can directly or indirectly cause the healing, the resilience that comes from that. And that's your responsibility. Nobody can do that for you. Nobody can do that for you. So look around, as you think of times, maybe there's something in your past that you're dragging along behind you. You've been dragging it for years, and just choose to let that go, right? It's there. It doesn't mean that you're going to pretend it never happened or it doesn't exist. If we're not willing to face it, we can't overcome it. I often say that until we own our story, it's going to own us. Until we own our story, it's going to own us. And so we absolutely have to look at it and own it, own the scars, own the wound, but let it heal and move forward, right? Life is too short to spend it looking in the rearview mirror. And when you're looking at the ashes of the past, remember that rebuilding is the most beautiful part, right? The ashes are there, but let's rebuild. Let's don't just leave the ruin forever. Let's rebuild, because that's the resilience piece. That's the rebounding piece, the growing back stronger and better because of it, not bitter about it. Until next time.